Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast. I'm your host, DylanLasagna, and this is episode number 218 of this icy yet spicy podcast for all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. And in this episode, we're here to talk about and review the week that was week 1 of the 2024 NFL season and get you ready for the week that will be week 2 of this 2024 season. So here we are. We're just wrapped up the very first week of the NFL season, the very new one. And man, it was something to talk about, something to take note of. So that's what we're here to do in this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. And we're back to the old format of how we used to cover the NFL. So in case you're wondering what that was, well, basically, it's just how exactly what the title of this episode is. Reviewing the week that happened like just recently, and then in the other half of this episode, we're getting you ready for the week that will be in the back half of this episode. So that's what we're going to be doing in this episode. So in the first half of this episode, we're going to be talking about the week that just happened, which is week 1, and then get you ready for the next week, which will be week 2 of this 2024 season. But before we talk about all of that, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So make sure you're following Very Cold Lasagna on social media, on X and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. And then make sure you rate and review the show, however many stars you want to give it, and leave a nice little review, feedback, what have you, if you're listening to this on audio, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like button, smash the subscribe button if you're not subscribed already, and then make sure you smash the notification bell so you'll be notified of each and every episode, video, anything that I post on the Very Cold Lasagna YouTube channel so you'll be notified. And then make sure you comment down below with your own takes on each and every video and episode that I put up on the YouTube channel so we can have a conversation. And then make sure you share this episode with your friends, your neighbors, your strangers, co-workers, colleagues at school, wherever you are. Make sure you spread the good, the bad, the ugly about this filthy casual show by the name of Very Cold Lasagna. So first things first, we got to talk about the week that was the very first week of the 2024 NFL season. So like I said, how we're going to do this recap and preview for the NFL for every week of the NFL season is, like I said, in the first half of these episodes is that we're going to talk about the week that just happened. And then in the back half of this episode, we're going to talk about the next week that is to come. So starting things off with the week that was the very first week of the NFL season. Kickoff weekend, it certainly didn't disappoint. It started off with a little bit of a twist, a little bit of controversy per se. And that started off with the Thursday night kickoff game as the Kansas City Chiefs lifted up their second straight banner, hosting the Baltimore Ravens in a little bit of a nail biter. And while it wasn't necessarily a eye-popping game for Patrick Mahomes on the stat board, they certainly got it done. They certainly did what they needed to do. They got big nights from key players to hold off the Ravens by a toe. Literally. This was their brutality by a toe. Just by a toe. And it was all but likely that they were going to win that way. So for the Chiefs, they escaped by a toe, 27-20. I'm sorry for the bad toe puns. But the Chiefs certainly not going to regret, though, coming out of this game, that they were they were certainly not going to regret drafting a receiver by the name of Xavier Worthy, because he certainly proved his worth in this game. So on his first night in the regular season, he showed himself as an all-around threat that the Chiefs have been missing since Tyreek Hill was traded to the Miami Dolphins. Xavier Worthy was kind of flying all over the place, all over the field, being a major deep threat for Mahomes, scored 2 touchdowns. And this was despite Kansas City missing Marquise Hollywood Brown for this game. And this is also Rashee Rice and running back Isaiah Pacheco, they also made up for Hollywood Brown's absence as well. Yeah, it's saying, okay, only one player was missing, but nonetheless, Rashee Rice and Pacheco also had good performances, but Xavier Worthy stood out the most because, they drafted this kid. There's some questions about him, not in terms of character presence, but in terms of performance, and he certainly showed out in this game. So the Chiefs certainly not going to regret making that pick back in April. Meanwhile, for the Baltimore Ravens, Isaiah Likely, even in defeat, despite some totality, the Ravens may have found themselves another key consistent weapon. Isaiah Likely had himself a good year last year, but Lamar Jackson certainly found a key consistent weapon in that offense, someone that can go to other than him always running the damn ball by himself. But more importantly, he did a lot more than Mark Andrews did. It was a little surprising that Andrews didn't do a whole lot in that game, and Isaiah Likely very likely could supplant him if he keeps this going. So something to keep an eye on, because it's a little surprising that Mark Andrews is I'm not saying he's regressing a bit, but something to keep an eye on. So still one game out, but this was a nice one to kick off the NFL season. So then we also had a Friday night game, the first Friday night game in over a year. And this one was in Brazil as the Philadelphia Eagles took on the Green Bay Packers. And Philadelphia came away from a nail biter, 34-29, mainly because of new addition running back Saquon Barkley being the difference maker, getting 3 total touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 1 in the air. And with Philadelphia, Saquon seems to be that equalizer right now for Jalen Hurts. As long as he can stay healthy, Jalen, he didn't exactly have a great first game under new coordinator Kellen Moore. I thought he had some very off throws. He also threw a bad interception as well. But I thought some of that pressure during this game was taken off from him by Saquon's strong first impression in this game. And I think as the weeks go on, and as long, again, as he stays healthy, Saquon Barkley is going to help Jalen Hurts come back on those bad turnovers, take some of the pressure off of him, especially not force Jalen Hurts to run so much as well. Saquon could be that difference maker in this offense. Meanwhile, for the Green Bay Packers, there was some unfortunate news for them very late in the game because Jordan Love suffered an injury with just 15 seconds left to go in the game. He suffered an MCL sprain, because that turf in that stadium in Brazil is giving a lot of players a lot of issues, but none more than Jordan Love. Cameras were kept cutting to him, they were checking his calves all game long, they were trying to massage that thing, and it just really came to a head, in those last couple of seconds. So it kind of gave way in the last play that he had, and Packers fans should at least be a little relieved right now that it's not that serious. It's an MCL sprain. It's not like a tear, which is good news for them. But you're still gonna have to undergo about 3 to 6 weeks without Jordan Love, and you're gonna have to go through Malik Willis, who just got there. So, especially considering that Malik Willis did not look good in those final 2 plays of the game. In fairness, though, he only just got there, but still, and he's just there, and he took a big sack to end the game. It just not promising already, but it's only the first game. He had plenty of time to he has plenty of time now to learn the playbook. So hopefully Matt LaFleur is hoping that Malik Willis will be able to pick up the offense when they have their home opener against the Colts. So more on that in a bit. So Philadelphia comes away with this one against the Packers in Brazil. Moving on to the Sunday slate of games, starting with the early morning portion as the Pittsburgh Steelers took on the Atlanta Falcons. And this one was kind of a snooze fest that we had to watch on Fox. This is the debut of quarterbacks. Justin Fields had to step in because Russell Wilson had an injury that crept up late before the opener. And meanwhile, for Kirk Cousins, this was his regular season debut, and unfortunately, he did not really impress all that much. But let's talk first about who won this game. The Pittsburgh Steelers came away with this one mainly because of Chris Boswell's 4 long field goals. They were just enough. They were honestly just enough because, well, neither quarterback necessarily did a lot in this one, and it was the defense of the Steelers that was keeping Kirk Cousins at bay. Speaking of that Steelers defense, that was the main thing for Pittsburgh that I took away from. Yeah, that J.J. Watt-led defense is, look, I think it's going to want to, again, have to carry the Steelers, especially if Justin Fields nor Russell Wilson can provide a spark for this offense. I mean, it's not to say that Justin Fields can try to do something. It's just that, well, I'm not sure if I have high hopes for his coordinator nor his supporting cast to do so. And then meanwhile, on the Atlanta side, it's still fairly early as Kirk Cousins tries to work his way back from the Achilles injury. So it was not necessarily a surprise that Captain Kirk was going to struggle in his first game back from that torn Achilles that he suffered mid-season last year. I mean, let's face it, the man didn't have a lot of reps during the team's offseason activities, nor play in the preseason. So it's expected. It was expected that he was going to have some trouble in this game. So I'm not overreacting to how bad Kirk Cousins did in this one. But if he struggles again next week in Philadelphia and probably the third game beyond that, well, then we can sound the alarms on this Kirk Cousins experiment in Atlanta. So Pittsburgh came away with this game with the win. Moving on to the Buffalo Bills taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Josh Allen and the Bills came back down from a 17-3 halftime deficit to go on a 21-point scoring tear before they held serve on a feisty Arizona team to come away with this one 34-28. And Arizona at one point, again, they led this game 17-3. They had a 14-0 lead at one point going into the second quarter, but throughout the game, their defense, which I had questions about going into this season, they undid the offense's hard work. That's not to say the offense could have did more, but it's just the defense that was suspect going into the season. They gave up makeable tackles. They also gave up avoidable plays from Josh Allen. So they gave up all that, and that led to them putting pressure on an offense that just couldn't counterpunch in the end, especially considering that they didn't really get Marvin Harrison Jr. all that involved. So a little bit of a very disappointing performance from Arizona, especially considering that their pass rush didn't really do all that much in this game. And they're like dead last this week. Meanwhile, on the Buffalo Bills side, like half of this game heavily relied on Josh Allen. Again, Josh Allen converting plays to his guys like Dawson Knox, Keon Coleman, Shakir. But the scores that got them back in this one were, well, ones that he made himself. You know, especially that goal, that kind of like, I think it was like a 10-yard touchdown, like in the third or fourth quarter. So those were scores that he made himself to get them back in this game, take the lead for good. So he basically, once again, had to do it all himself. I mean, you just have to ask ourselves, just how sustainable is this do-it-all Josh Allen? It's only the first game of the season, and he's already having to do it all by himself. Just considering that all those names that I just listed, they're not really the main guys of the offense. So we know Josh Allen is one of the NFL's most dynamic quarterbacks, but you just have to wonder, like I said, is this sustainable? Is this kind of production sustainable, like for several more games throughout the year. Can he do everything by himself? We'll see. Someone has to step up. Now, looking at the Chicago Bears going up against the Tennessee Titans, this was the debut for Caleb Williams as the starting quarterback for Chicago. And yeah, he didn't necessarily do good in this one. This was a game that the Bears offense would like to have back. But despite that, the Bears defense and special teams saved the day. It was your typical Bears football kind of game, as they led the way with a couple of second half touchdowns, like a blocked punt, a pick six on Will Levis to come back and win this game over the Tennessee Titans, 24-17. So the Titans, they're a rebuilding team. Like it's no surprise there. I mean, they have some very solid talent there. They have questions about Will Levis. Can he be that guy? He made a bad executive decision with that pick six. So there are still some things in progress with this team. It's just a matter of can they actually execute that. So one of the things I would recommend them doing, especially your coach Brian Callahan, is lean more on the running game with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, which was actually one of the very productive things in that game against Chicago. So until Will Levis can make some more better decisions with the football and less boneheaded ones, then my filthy casual suggestion would be to keep running the football a little bit more, to keep Will Levis under control. Meanwhile, for the Chicago Bears, going forward, you really want to get some more production, some much better performances from your first overall pick, especially when right away you have a big matchup against the Houston Texans, because you can't afford to have Caleb Williams to have like this kind of game where he's eating big sacks because you're scrambling out of the pocket like it's a Pac-12 and you're trying to just make something happen, but nope, you take a big sack. So it's the first game. You got it out of the way. You came away with the win, so we can move on. Then we had the New England Patriots taking on the Cincinnati Bengals in, I'm not saying necessarily the upset of the week, but they managed to pull out a surprise win. So for the Patriots, yeah, not necessarily a sexy performance, but they did just enough to get Jared Mayo his first win as a head coach on the backs of a balanced team win over Cincinnati 16-10. So I'd say in this one, it was just more about New England being more disciplined enough to win this game than Cincinnati. There were two things that they did well: run the ball and make the passing plays as effective yet simplistic as possible for Jacoby Brissett. So basically, New England was just the better coach team on that week, and they really played hard to make Jared Mayo's coaching debut a success. So it's simple as that. So for a rebuilding team in New England, they got the job done on Sunday. Meanwhile, for the Bengals, with all these aspirations to try and bounce back in this season, not necessarily a good start. They made one too many mistakes on their end. They missed some opportunities as well, and it cost them the game. Perhaps the biggest mistake of them all, though, was the catch and fumble by tight end Tanner Hudson near the goal line early in the second quarter, because that would have been a touchdown had he kept control of the ball. And then they also had some drives that ended with Joe Burrow getting sacked. A pretty common theme, once again, being revisited in this season, like very early. So the Bengals got to get this fixed, after this first game, because it's not going to get any easier from there. Then we had the Houston Texans taking on the Indianapolis Colts in a very early, pivotal AFC South division matchup, already revisiting that key win or go home game from last year. And this was just a sequel of it. A tight back and forth division battle that went down to the wire, but new Texans running back Joe Mixon put the Colts comeback's hopes on ice to hold them off 29-27. And that was my biggest takeaway from this game. The new toys that came to play. Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs for Houston. They were really pivotal in this one. Joe Mixon instantly provided what the Texans were very lacking last year. A flowing running game, which takes a lot of pressure off of CJ Stroud. And then Mixon, he wasn't the only one to make a strong first impression. Stephon Diggs, he got real comfy with CJ Stroud in this game. He got a 2-touchdown game and really added to an already strong Texans receiving game with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. But Diggs makes it even stronger. So CJ Stroud, he's gotten real comfy with his brand new toys, and this was a really good first showing for a team that wants to go even deeper in the playoffs. Meanwhile, for Anthony Richardson, in the Colts, there was no shame. There was not really a lot of shame in this loss. So Richardson had himself a really nice showing because he showed some great upside, even in defeat. So hopefully that will continue to translate as the rest of the season comes along, especially going into week 2 on the road. Then we had the Miami Dolphins take on the Jacksonville Jaguars in the Battle of Florida. As the Jaguars seemed like they were going to be on their way to winning this one, but unfortunately, they made a series of mistakes that allowed the Dolphins to slowly but surely catch up, and they won it on a last-second field goal thanks to Jason Saunders to assure a comeback win in favor of the Miami Dolphins, 20-17. So, why did the Jaguars lose this game? Well, it was their lack of discipline. They lacked discipline. They made some key mistakes, especially the one that triggered this Dolphins comeback. Travis Etienne fumbling at the goal line, and that led to this series of unfortunate events that caused the Jaguars to lose a game that they realistically should have won had they just disciplined themselves. Especially considering that, if they want to reestablish themselves as a playoff contender, let alone a contender within their division, they have to better discipline themselves. They better get their act together late in games where they have the lead. Meanwhile, for the Miami Dolphins, sure, they won this game, but I feel like something that to keep an eye on is the offensive line, because the Miami Dolphins were in a hole in the first place because of that revamped offensive line. And I don't mean in a good way, because they lost 2 key players in the offseason from that offensive line. And Tua was kind of struggling in this one. He barely had time to throw in this game. He also suffered some drive-ending sacks that forced Miami to punt. And the Dolphins were just barely able to steal this one, thanks to the Jaguars' own implosion and the Dolphins finding their inner Hulk Hogan brother to come back and win this one. So they may have gone away with this one, but that offensive line is something to keep an eye on going forward. Then we had the New Orleans Saints taking on the Carolina Panthers, a game that I completely forgot to talk about in the last general NFL coverage episode, my Filthy Casuals preview. So something I oversaw, I overlooked because it's the Saints, it's the Panthers, my bad. So but the Saints, they put out the hurt, they put out the hammer on the Carolina Panthers, because they put the Kitties in blue to sleep very early, with getting damn near everyone involved on offense in a total beatdown in the Superdome at home, 47-10. At one point, it was 30-0 at halftime. Actually, 30-3 at halftime. But that was a very ugly game for the Carolina Panthers that has a new head coach, a second-year quarterback in Bryce Young. And all I could say is that if they have a repeat performance like that, Bryce Young is going to struggle just as much as he did the year prior. No matter who the head coach is, no matter what the personnel is that if he performs like that, if he struggles to find open receivers, avoidable sacks, throw a interception on his very first pass of the year, man, it's going to be looking like Bust City already. And then for the New Orleans Saints, I'll give them this. I'll give them credit this week. They had themselves a really good performance. They looked much more aggressive under new coordinator Click Kubiak, a familiar name that some 49ers fans may be familiar with. But let's pump the brakes a bit, please. Let's chill. Let's relax. It's only week 1. I don't know how many times I gotta say this. It's only week 1. Let's pump the brakes on deeming the Saints a serious threat until next week when they go to Dallas and play the Cowboys in that defense, because it's Carolina. Of course, they were going to easily be able to shift their weight around on the Kitties in blue. So if they're able to shut up the Cowboys, if they're able to pull their weight around them, then I'll sit down and shut up about the New Orleans Saints for once. So let's see how they do next week. Then we had the Minnesota Vikings taking on the New York Giants, and Sam Darnold, not JJ McCarthy, who's out for the season. He had himself a strong showing. A 3-touchdown performance in the Meadowlands in a beatdown of the Giants 28-6. And, Sam Darnold, in his first game, trying to prove himself. Again, same thing with the Saints. Let's see if he can carry over his first good game heading into week 2, because the Giants are pushovers. But the real test is going to fare how he fares against a much tougher team. And that team happens to be a familiar foe in the 49ers. Meanwhile, for the Giants, well, it's Daniel Jones. And it's becoming more and more apparent, with every time they lose with Daniel Jones, it's more and more apparent that I think they're regretting the choice of picking Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley and not going for a quarterback that's, more competent than Daniel Jones. And it's getting more apparent that, Daniel Jones, when he returned from the ACL tear in the preseason, it was met with typical Danny Derping. A pick 6 against the Houston Texans, and then now you get to the regular season, is met with typical more Danny Pennies. Going for under 200 yards, and then going for 2 interceptions, one of them being an easy pick 6. And then Jones was sacked several times, and half of them were his fault. So, yeah, not good. And people were booing his ass. And in those new uniforms, too. Not good stuff at all. So, interesting situation that the Giants are entering in. Really interesting stuff, and not in a good way. Are they going to consider benching Daniel Jones, later on in the season? Especially with that big, fat contract? I don't know. So, moving on to the afternoon slate of games, we had the LA Chargers take on the Las Vegas Raider. Jim Harbaugh's coaching return in the NFL, and he got the W. He got the W in this one, thanks to J.K. Dobbins' big 100-yard game, helping the Chargers pull away late against the Raiders. And yeah, that defense doing some work on that Raiders offense. And for the Raiders, I feel like they cost themselves the game on multiple occasions, which they honestly started fine. Antonio Pierce's squad started out okay with a big touchdown run from Alexander Madison, but then again, things just fell apart from there. From Gardner Minshew's backward pass in the second quarter, and then Antonio Pierce choosing to punt late in the fourth instead of going for it or going for a field goal at least. But that gave way to the game-stealing touchdown from the Chargers. And the Raiders just committed way too many mistakes. And something that told me about, going for that punt, Antonio Pierce maybe just doesn't have faith in his offense. Something, was kind of a little concerning when he decided to go for his choice of quarterbacks in the offseason. But yeah, you can't really blame him too much considering that there weren't that many options there. Meanwhile, for the LA Chargers, sure, they got the win over the Raiders, but they still have plenty of work to do, especially with that offense. Sure, they seem to have a running game now, but that doesn't excuse Justin Herbert. not having to do much because he still certainly has some things to work on. So, yeah, there's certainly going to be a point where Herbert is going to have to win them games. So he's going to have to get to back to that point. So for the Chargers, still some work to do on that offense, and I think they will get back to that point. But for now, they did okay with this one. Then we had the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Denver Broncos. This was a big game for the running back duo of Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet. They helped the Seahawks barely escape this one against Denver, 26-20. And for Denver, they almost won this one, but Bo Nix made a couple of mistakes in this game, and some people saying, Bo Nix did terribly. He was very off, which was true. I think he did okay. Bo Nix did fine. He did struggle big in finding receivers in stride, minimizing the turnovers. I felt like the turnovers he did make were kind of critical, but he did flash what made him good in college. So it is going to take time for him to shake the actual jitters. So there's still a couple games for him to shake off those jitters. And if he doesn't, then you can start raising eyebrows on Bo Nix, and especially at Sean Payton. For the Seattle Seahawks, they escaped with this one, but they almost lost this one because, of some issues with the offensive line. That offensive line also gave up some points in the end zone twice. They gave up 2 safeties. So Seattle has some serious issues with their front 5 in this game. They allowed Geno Smith to get sacked multiple times, and like I said, they allowed 2 safeties in 2 quarters. So yeah, it's not good. In fairness, though, this is an offensive line that has at least 2 new starters and 1 fill-in. So they were expected to have some sort of these issues early in the season, and they didn't have a lot of playing time together. So they're still trying to gel together, but not exactly a good first impression, if you ask me. So they still came away with the W, but not time to panic quite yet with that Seahawks offensive line. And if they do start having issues again, then you can panic. Then we have the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Cleveland Browns in the land, and their defense of Dallas, they made their presence felt in this one as they forced 2 turnovers and sacked Deshaun Watson 6 times in a dominant win over the skid marks, 33-17. And I feel like that defense is going to be a key anchor for Dallas' success in the regular season. In the playoffs, though, that remains to be seen. But Dak Prescott didn't really have to do much in this one, but it didn't really matter when Deshaun Watson, meanwhile, he really struggled cracking the code of that Cowboys defense. I guess Deshaun Watson, despite showing some flashes of his Houston self, he also overshadowed all that with the many mistakes he made in this game. Getting sacked, throwing some bad interceptions, and then just throwing some low ball throws. So, yeah, Deshaun Watson not off to a good start in his first game where he came away fully healthy. Fortunately, the slate lines up a little bit with the Jaguars, the Giants, the Raiders, and Washington on deck. And if somehow Deshaun Watson can't somehow provide something positive by the end of that slate, the Browns are in real trouble. Like, seriously, they're in some real deep shit. Especially considering that there's another investigation, there's another lawsuit on Deshaun Watson's, on his hands. Really? Come on now. Oh, boy. It's messy in skid marks land, and yet they decide to have SummerSlam there? Really? Unbelievable. Then we had the Tampa Bay Bucks taking on the Washington Commanders. Jane Daniels' regular season debut for Washington, but it was spoiled by Baker Mayfield picking up the home W for his team. He picked up right where he left off with his playoff performances with a 4-touchdown outing in the Bucks' dominating win over Washington, 37-20. But despite losing that game, Jayden Daniels looked the strongest out of the bunch of the rookie quarterbacks that played this weekend. Not necessarily eye-popping numbers, but he showed some nice upside when it came to his mobility. Throwing, it was okay. So, yeah, despite the loss, there were some nice things to like about Jayden Daniels and how he performed. It is important to remember, though, for Dan Quinn and his coaching staff, not to abuse him in his mobility in order to protect him from injury. Again, he's just a rookie. So Quinn and company are going to have to pick their spots, while more importantly, continuing to help him develop as a passer because, throwing's the name of the game in the NFL. And then for Tampa Bay, Mayfield and the passing game did most of the scoring Sunday. But I do feel like maybe that running game for the Bucs is starting to come along with rookie Bucky Irving and Rachaad White doing some decent damage on the Commanders' run defense. So who knows? Maybe that's finally coming along, but we'll see how that does in next week in the Motor City in the rematch with the Detroit Lions. Speaking of the Detroit Lions, they were in the Sunday night game, the first one of the season, against the LA Rams. They were in a nail biter, just like how it was in the wild card game. This one, though, it went to extras. So it went in extra overtime period, and David Montgomery was the hero for the Lions. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, they ran roughshod over the Los Angeles Rams. And Montgomery, he clinched the game-winning score as the Lions beat the Rams 26-20. And starting with the Lions, that Montgomery and Gibbs duo, it's still one of the most dangerous in the NFL. Like, they're one of the best running back combos in the NFL right now. This is evidenced by their usage in pretty much picking apart the Rams' running defense in the extra period, whether it's running inside the tackles or outside of it. It's like they can pretty much go in and out, and then they'll still find a way to gash you. So, in case you need another reminder, well, look at that overtime win, that overtime period against LA. Meanwhile, looking at the Rams, they did suffer a little bit of a blow in the receiving game, losing Puka Nacua for at least the next 4 games. He's put on IR with the nagging knee injury from the preseason. So that left with Matthew Stafford having to go with old reliable in that game against Detroit, Cooper Kupp. So Cooper Kupp stepped up again, like as if he never did. So yeah, he stepped up again. He's probably going to have to do so again, being that top man again, as if he never was. So pressure once again is going to have to come from someone that isn't Puka Nacua, that isn't Cooper Kupp, and that's going to loom large. So whoever that will be remains to be seen for at least the next 4 games as Puka Nacua works his way back. Then we had the Monday Night Football game to close out week 1 as my San Francisco 49ers took on the New York Jets. And we thought we were going to have Christian McCaffrey for this one, but we unfortunately did it. So someone had to step up to the plate, and that man's name was Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason answered the bell. He had a 100-yard rushing game, and he certainly ran with it. The Niners took it, ran with it, and they beat the Jets out of the Jets. 32-19. They took the first win of the season for themselves, and the thing for my San Francisco 49ers is like, man, I just wonder, like, why didn't they make Jordan Mason the clear running back 2 from the start instead of Elijah Mitchell? Like, it's interesting, like, how that works out. He's like, Jordan Mason's been there for a little while now, like since Brock Purdy was there too, and yet he had to play second fiddle to the often injured Elijah Mitchell. So I'm like very glad to see him get that opportunity presented to him on a Monday night. He got his chance to shine because I thought he was always an underrated player on that team, like even as a backup. And he stepped up in a big way where McCaffrey was hurt. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell's out for the season. So very good to see him like have a big game in where his team really need to step up. And then for the New York Jets, like Aaron Rodgers is back. That's cool and all, but it's pretty obvious that they need some help. Like, he needs some serious help. At least Aaron Rodgers came away from this game unscathed, but it's just like, damn. It's like, he doesn't have any help outside of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. It's like, that passing game is like a mess already. It's like, Alan Lazard didn't really do a whole lot. And then Mike Williams is still working his way back from the ACL injury. And, well, just trying to protect him from getting injured, too. So it's just like, they got nothing in the passing game that's going to scare opposing defenses. So Aaron Rodgers may be back, but he needs some serious help. So after all that, that was the opening week of the NFL season. And yeah, some good, exciting stuff already to start off the year. Some good, some bad, some ugly. But again, pump the brakes on whether your team won or lost. I mean, I like some of the stuff that I saw from my team, the 49ers, but it's only the first week. And these first couple of weeks, we're trying to get a gauge of, what to expect. And try to gauge the overreactions. And as we go along, as we get closer to midway through the season, then we at least have an idea of of all these teams. At least we think we do. Right? I think. But anyway, yeah, that was the first week of the NFL season in the books. What do you guys think about week 1? Did your team come out on the winning end or on the losing end? And if they came out on the losing end, what do they need to do to adjust and get their first win of the season in week 2? Let me know in the comments on YouTube or on social media on X or Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. Let's have a conversation about it as we now transition over to talking about the week that will be week 2 of the 2024 season. And kicking things off in week 2 will be the Thursday night football game, the first one of the year, and that the actual first one of the year, by the way. And that is only on Amazon Prime Video for however much money it will be this year. Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime Video, that stupid ass paywall, as the Buffalo Bills take on the Miami Dolphins. Both teams won their games. And in my opinion, I think this is going to be a little bit of a defensive battle than most people expect. Some people think it will be a shootout once again, like it was on that Sunday night game to close out the year last year. But in my opinion, I think it could be a little bit of a shootout. Not shootout, a defensive battle. A defensive battle where, maybe the trenches, because those issues with the offensive line with the Miami Dolphins that I just mentioned, and maybe some issues with the Bills offensive line that could have some trouble with the Dolphins pass rush. So there could be a little bit of defensive civil war that could be on hand with both of these teams. Who do I want to win? Who knows? Maybe it's either team. But the safe bet is the Bills. So moving on to the Sunday slate of games, starting with the early morning portion, we first talk about the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Both teams need a win after some tough losses to start their year. Personally, what I want to see from both of these teams coming out of this matchup is, Antonio Pierce having a little bit more faith in his offense. He kind of gave up halfway through the game, like in the back half of it. So I know your quarterback situation is not the greatest, but you don't want to go into a situation like Josh McDaniels did, like early last year, where his quarterback situation was shitty with Jimmy G, and repeat that this year with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. It's like you kind of dug your grave already. So it's just like, might as well, run with the hand you already have. So it's just like, do it already. Like, just have a little, show a little confidence in your offense. Meanwhile, for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, I mean, they're obviously looking to erase last week's heartbreak in their home opener. Just make sure that you're likely to not have some totality in this game. Just make sure there's none of that. If you do that, you go with the Ravens. That's a safe pick. And then you had the LA Chargers, taking on the Carolina Panthers. Easily, I'm going with the Chargers in this one, just as long as Justin Herbert and the passing attack, get more production. I want to see more out of them in this one. Meanwhile, for Bryce Young and the Panthers, they probably won't win this game, especially after losing one of their key offensive linemen. But there's an opportunity to present itself to at least try and have a better game in this one. Then we have one of America's games of the week on Fox, as the New Orleans Saints take on the Dallas Cowboys, as both of these teams look to try and prove that last week's game wasn't a fluke, as both of these teams won in convincing fashion against bad teams in the first week. So, especially the New Orleans Saints, by the way. So, we'll see who comes out on top. I can't necessarily pick one because, well, it's a battle between two teams that have won against bad teams in week one. So, it's a toss-up between either team. Then we have the Tampa Bay Bucks taking on the Detroit Lions in a rematch of last year's NFC divisional playoff game. This should be an interesting one because it's not that long ago where both of these teams face each other. They have most of the same personnel coming back to face one another. But I'm going with the safe pick, going with the Lions. Like, they have a deeper, much more skilled personnel group that makes it easier to pick, easier to go for, especially in the rushing game and the passing game. Then we have the Indianapolis Colts going up against the Green Bay Packers. The Colts looking to get both teams actually looking to get their first win of the season, but I feel like it's going to be easier for the Colts to get that way, especially when Malik Willis is going to be starting this game while Jordan Love recovers from that MCL sprain. So Anthony Richardson is certainly going to try to bounce back from suffering a close loss to the Houston Texans. Then we have the Cleveland Browns going up to the land of all elite to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars in their home opener. Both teams looking to earn a much-needed win after losing terribly in week one. So, yeah, like with one of those other games, this one's a toss-up a little bit, but the Browns are certainly going to try to need to get this win after losing bad to Dallas and, another lawsuit at the coming from Deshaun Watson. So, a lot of things to prove for the Cleveland Browns. Then we have my San Francisco 49ers taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Both teams won last week. And again, another prove-it game for both of these teams. For my 49ers, they're looking to finally get a win in Minnesota for the first time in a long time. Last time they came to US Bank Stadium, well, not necessarily the kindest, on a Monday night last year. Meanwhile, for the Minnesota Vikings, they're looking to prove that, well, their win against the Giants last week was no fluke. So they're going to try to prove that once again against the San Francisco 49ers, especially when they have a familiar face from that place in Sam Darnold. Then we have the New York Jets taking on the Tennessee Titans, both teams in search of a win. And for this game, I'm looking to see if Aaron Rodgers can hopefully get some production out of his other receivers, not named Garrett Wilson. Meanwhile, for the Tennessee Titans, I'm looking for a better performance from Will Levis after his second half collapse in Chicago. Hopefully, like I said, minimize the mistakes that he made in that game. No pick sixes, unnecessary pick sixes. And to do that, go with my filthy casual suggestion of utilizing the run game more. Tony Pollard and Tyson Davis, I'm mixing up the names, but your running game, essentially your running game. Utilizing the running game more if you're buying Callahan, the head coach, to better help your quarterback. But my safe consensus is the New York Jets get the win. Then the other side of New York, the New York Giants, go to the nation's capital to take on the Commanders in an NFC East division matchup for both teams in need of a win as well. But I think it's safe to say that the Commanders are probably going to take this one because, well, is there really any hope that Daniel Jones can fix himself? I mean, it's possible against a rebuilding team in Washington, but I feel like Jane Daniels will look to impress in the Commanders' regular season home opener, especially with Jane Daniels' first regular season home opener as a rookie quarterback. Who knows? He's looking to ball out in this one. Then in the late afternoon slate of games, we have the LA Rams taking on the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona's home opener in a division matchup. And both teams in need of a win as well. But the Rams' offensive line has certainly taken some hits, like whether it's short term, long term. They have been riddled with the injury bug lately. And that's certainly not good news for Matthew Stafford, as his receiving core, some of his receiving core has taken a hit as well with Puka Nacua. So certainly not some good news. So the Rams are certainly going to be looking to take advantage of that on the defensive side of the ball. That's if they're already dead last ranked defense can certainly do so, but that remains to be seen. This is another one of those pick'em games that you want to keep an eye on. The Pittsburgh Steelers at 1-0 taking on the 0-1 Denver Broncos. Denver seeking out their win as they open up the Mile High Stadium for the first time in the regular season. So Bo Nix looking to rebound in his first home opener in the regular season after a very mixed first game in Seattle. Meanwhile, for the Steelers, it seems like Justin Fields is going to be starting this game again, but whether he stays the starter after this game remains to be seen. But to play it safe, let's go with the Steelers. Then we have the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Kansas City Chiefs in another matchup between these teams that I feel like they're just destined. They've always destined to meet each other for some reason. Anyway, the Bengals, they really need to get a win here. They really need to get a win here. They don't want to start 0-2 again for the second straight year, or is it the third straight year? Maybe I'm wrong, but either way, they don't want to start 0-2 again, because if they start 0-2 and you get closer and closer to that late stretch, it's going to bite them in the ass. So the Bengals really got to find a way to pull off what I think is going to have to be an upset over a Chiefs team that's going to look to go 2-0 in their quest for a three-peat, especially with those Zebras on their side. So, yeah, it's going to be one of those tough matchups between both of these teams. Then we have a very interesting and one Sunday night matchup that I'm already looking forward to, and that's between the Chicago Bears at 1-0 taking on the also 1-0 Houston Texans. A very young, exciting, fresh matchup between two young quarterbacks at least, in Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud. As I talked about with Caleb Williams, hopefully he'll have a game where he gets to showcase his skills. Hopefully he shows up for this game. And of course, the Texans offense, where it just has so many weapons at its disposal. I don't know. My gut says the Houston Texans take this game, but anything goes in this one, if we're being honest here. Then we have the Monday Night Football game to close out week 2 as the Atlanta Falcons take on the Philadelphia Eagles. Kirk Cousins, for whatever reason, the NFL schedule makers just love to put Kirk Cousins on a Monday night, always week 2, against the Philadelphia Eagles, whether it was with the Minnesota Vikings or now with the Atlanta Falcons. For how many years now? It's been the last 2-3 years. They always want to put Kirk Cousins on a Monday night, in week 2, against the Philadelphia Eagles. It's just like someone has a big fetish, a big Kirk Cousins week 2 Monday night fetish against the Philadelphia Eagles. What's wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you? Anyway, Kirk Cousins, he faces yet another major test in his return from the Achilles injury. And this one's not going to be pretty. Against an Eagles team that's going to be opening up its doors to Lincoln Financial Field in the regular season. Well, fresh off, like 6 months fresh off from hosting WrestleMania. And, well, they're certainly trying to look to finish their story that they failed to finish several months ago with how their regular season ended last year. But anyway, the Eagles, fresh off their trip from Brazil, they're opening up the link, and I think they're going to take this one with ease. So, yeah, that's the week 2 slate. Let me know who you're going with this coming week, what your expectations are for each team or just maybe your team. And let's have a conversation about that as well. So that was the week that was with week 1, and it's the week that will be with week 2 in this 2024 NFL season. Let me know your thoughts about this first week and this upcoming week as we wrap up this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. So anyway, with that in mind, that is it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna, episode number 218 of this icy yet spicy podcast with all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. And until the next one, eat that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. And we'll be back with another round of recaps, previews for this week that was the NFL and the week that will be in the National Football League with week 2 in the next episode. But until then, and until the next one, peace out.